So that day I was actually off. I was kind of a new mom. So I had not such a new mom, but I had a 20-month-old. So I was working, I had staggered my shift. So I happened to be off from work that day. I was working weekends, so my husband could watch the baby on the weekends. So I was feeding my son, Clayton, and there was a breaking news alert that came over from Channel 4 and it interrupted my program. And it was Rob Morrison. And at first they were reporting that there was smoke coming from the Trade Center. And, of course I was glued to it. And as we were watching live, we saw the second plane hit. And, I was just so sickened. All I wanted to do, and I was feeding my son at the time that the TV was on. So I just kind of grabbed him and just wanted to hold him for a moment because I knew what was happening. As soon as Rob Morrison said, "Whoa, that was a plane," I think that's the moment where it all kind of became real for me. And so instinctively, I wanted to know if my loved ones were okay. So a dear friend of mine, one of my best friends, Miriam, she was in the Amex building, and I was just so concerned because of the proximity. And of course, we couldn't get through on the phones. I couldn't find out if my brother-in-law was okay. He worked out there too. And we were just panicked that we couldn't reach anybody on the phone. And so the World Trade Center, meant a lot to me too. My father worked on the 101st floor at Central Gulf Lines when I was a kid. So I used to go with my dad. It was a big treat for my brother and I to go in on a Saturday and, go to work with dad. And he would take us afterwards. We'd walk through Battery Park and we'd get lunch out in Chinatown. And it was just such a big part of my childhood. So on so many levels, I was just shocked. And, like everybody else all around New Jersey, we kind of all gathered with our loved ones, and everyone sort of rushed home. And I know my friends were, picking up their school-age children and getting them home right away. And we were all panicked. So of course, once I knew that everyone was okay, when my phone was blowing up from work, from News 12, I quickly had to get off to work and start doing the stories. So, gosh, there were just so many stories in New Jersey, so many families, so much loss. I think what strikes me the most is, we had one of our reporters was over there because he lived in the city. So he was kind of like the guy that did all, the live shots and all the press conferences from Manhattan, but the rest of us were really here. And so the command center was at Liberty State Park in Jersey City. And wow, when I think about that, it just, like, my heart still breaks, because what I remember, so you had all these people that were, lighting candles in Manhattan and, with pictures and so forth. But that was very much a reality also in New Jersey. So there would be the husbands, the wives, the brothers, the sisters, the children who were just lost and, begging us as reporters, as TV reporters, to put the picture up on the screen of their loved one. And there was such desperation, and of course, maybe the first couple of days, we may have put a couple pictures up, but, days turned into weeks, and they were still coming, and they were still hoping, and they were just so lost, right? They were just so lost. And for me, that's what sticks. I remember, people clinging on to me, like begging me to. And at a certain point, our news director didn't want those up anymore. And that was really hard. It was really hard to say no. It was really hard to not be able to help them, and of course, all these folks were hoping that their loved ones were, in a hospital somewhere, at someone's apartment, at someone's house, that they maybe had amnesia, that they were too ill to call or connect. And they were, still hanging on to that small bit of hope. And, Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of hope. There wasn't a lot of hope. There weren't a lot of stories of people. I mean, there were here and there, you would hear, one or two, but there weren't many. And so, gosh, it was just, covering Liberty State Park, and many of us also covered Bayonne, which is where the bodies were being brought into New Jersey. And it was just terrible. And the smoke quality, the air quality was just terrible too. I remember even in Jersey City and Bayonne, I remember coming home and blowing my nose, and it was just black stuff coming out of my nose. I don't know if you covered it also, but I remember that. I remember, and then fear, I had friends that didn't leave the city. So then I was, concerned for them too. And I remember, Christy Whitman saying like, oh, the air quality is fine. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think it's fine. And I remembered this from one other time. I used to cover, and I did stupid things as a reporter. I think many of us did. I remember being pregnant, being out on a fire truck out in the Pine Barrens covering fires and pregnant. And so it was reminiscent to that kind of situation. I remember coming home from those days and having that black soot. And so I thought, wow, if I'm in Jersey City and I'm getting this kind of soot in my nose, there's no way that's healthy out there. And, that's just from a real personal level. And I remember just thinking, my God, like, what are they telling first responders out there, that it's okay to be out there, and I worried for them because I saw firsthand, how it affected me. And, I have asthma too. So I wouldn't say that my asthma was terrible from it. I think I was far enough away, but we definitely all had soot coming out of our nose, like black. Gosh, it was just, many, many dark days, and then many, many days of, realizing that we all had loved ones, right, who passed away. And so I had a sorority sister from college. I went to Rutgers College, and Tammy Fallon, she was pregnant at the time. I saw her on Oprah. I remember her being pregnant. So she lost her husband. He was going to be setting up, I believe, a hub for his company in Red Bank. And he was just days away from that. And she lost him. And, we lost a friend of ours from college also. And just so many people. And, then I found out that a childhood friend of mine, Kenny Tejan, passed away. He was a Port Authority cop, a hero. And so his sister Lori and I were friends as kids. We were, we went to different elementary schools, but we were both in like this G&T program and would meet up at another school. So I knew her very well. And my brother was very good friends with Kenny. And, that was hard. And then all the numbers just started coming out, right? Like, so I grew up in Middletown, New Jersey. And so my dad was the CFO in Middletown at the time. And it hit hard when the numbers started coming in. And so, 10, 12, 15, 20, like 37 people from my town were killed. And, my church, St. Mary's Church in Middletown, it's, where I got married. It had such a huge loss of parishioners that it was, gosh, it just, it was a dark time. It was such a tough time and a dark time. And I guess all these years later, you look back at some of, the good things that came out of it. It brought the town together, right? It brought the town together, and they built this beautiful memorial garden, which is by the train station. It's over by the cultural center. And I don't know if you've ever been out there, but it's so beautiful. And you could walk the path, and it's got, stones for each person, including Kenny. And, it's quite nice. It really is. It's a special, special place. And so News 12, and then the years started going by. And so News 12 would have me be live there, as my hometown every year on the memorial. And, sadly, they were not able to do it this past year because of the pandemic. But it's, it's a special place. But Middletown definitely was hit hard. I know that they say that, they say that Hoboken, some people say that Hoboken had the most people, and, certainly not taking away from that. But I think that Hoboken had a lot of transplant people, a lot of people who were living there maybe for business, right, to be closer to the city. But I do think Middletown had the most people from its town. So yeah, it was, just story upon story. And, all of that definitely does take a toll, I think, as a reporter also. And, it was a crazy time. I mean, News 12 almost went under too. Yeah, News 12 almost went under. So I remember, and I was, I started in 96 at News 12. So there were definitely some other meetings like this over the years that kind of freaked us all out. We thought, the end was near. But after 9/11, right, it was such a time of pride, of patriotism. If anything, that was another really good thing that came out of it. You remember all the cars with the flags hanging out and people wearing American flags, and children making little beads of flags to wear. So there was a decision made by an executive at Cablevision, which is now owned by Altice. And at the time, the executive said that we could no longer wear American flags on our clothes. That we had to be unbiased, and that having an American flag on our clothing on air was a violation at the station. So none of us were allowed to wear American flags anymore on the air, none of the anchors, none of the reporters. And there had been some kind of memo about it, and I guess it got leaked because it was out there. And within one day, I think we lost like all of our advertisers. So it was a moment. And I remember we got called down to the big newsroom, and the station in Edison has changed quite a bit, but back then it was just this big open space. And so all of us came in, and we thought the place was closing. We thought it was, but they did hang on. And it was an interesting time. I think someone got demoted over that, and I think someone was fired over that decision. But it did not go over well with the public or with advertisers. And so, when I look at what's happening in the world now and so much division, right, I will say, as horrible as a time as it was definitely also a time of unity after 9/11, that we were just American. You weren't a Republican or a Democrat, you were an American. And, to see the president of our country meeting with, governors of different states, different parties, everyone really just looking out for the best interest of the country was nice. Right. So that's something that I'll remember, as that's one thing that I guess you remember fondly, is just that feeling of, I mean, there was not a house that didn't have a flag outside. You just saw it everywhere. So yeah, that was a crazy time at News 12. And yeah, not the best decision.
You ended up, though, covering a story that had a good ending, a joyful ending, albeit difficult. So tell us about that.
Sure. So my friend Lori Tejan, it was either her or one of her family members. They put me in, well, first of all, they told me about a story about two Port Authority police officers who had been trapped in the rubble and were rescued. And so you didn't hear a lot of rescues back then. And so now, we know that 13 people were rescued. So they were two of the 13 who were rescued. And it actually is one of the highlights of my career, really, because it just meant so much to me. But so it was Officer Will Jimeno, and he was a Port Authority cop. He lived in Clifton, and he was with his sergeant, John McLoughlin, who was from Long Island. And, the Tejans connected me to these officers and allowed me to tell their story. So I had met with the family, and I learned all about what happened. What a story. So they were running into the building. They thought they were going to be able to survive. Then the second building came down. 3 of them were trapped underneath an escalator shaft. And so they were pinned. They couldn't move. And if you can imagine this, so it was 3 of them. The third officer did not survive. But the story that he told me, that Will told me, was about what do you think about in your last moments? He had fireballs shooting at him. He had jet fuel leaking on them. They were being burned. They were being crushed by an escalator. Like one false move and they could have fallen deeper. And that is what happened to the third officer. And, what do you think about? What do you talk about? And they talked about their family. They talked about their loved ones. So Will was sharing stories about his wife, Allison, who was pregnant, and his little daughter, Bianca, and Allison was pregnant with their daughter, Olivia. And those are the kinds of things you think about in your last moments, or moments you think are your last moments. So, the story was just an incredible one. And, Will managed to move some iron piece of debris that was there and managed to alert the first responders, and they were rescued after being trapped for 13 hours. And it ended up being a movie. Oliver Stone ended up, I don't know if he purchased or if we just gave them the video, but all of the B-roll, the raw video, the stuff that made air, all of that was taken by Oliver Stone, and the actors were able to watch it and study it closely. And I really do think they did a tremendous job on air with that. It was the movie with Nicolas Cage, so World Trade Center with Nicolas Cage, who played Sergeant John McLoughlin, and Will Jimeno was played brilliantly, actually, by Michael Pena. So it was a tremendous movie. So over the years, so the first anniversary, I did the story, and then I followed him through rehab because Will had something known as compartment syndrome. So besides the burns and the damage to his skin, from having the elevator shaft on him for so long, the pressure of that had to be released from his leg. So it's actually very interesting how they did it, but there's special therapy for that, for compartment syndrome, which he suffered from. But it was his goal to walk his daughter to school on her first day of kindergarten, and he did. So it was quite special. It was quite special, and it was quite special to follow them for as long as I did, and to build that relationship. And it was wonderful for me to see that story being told on the big screen too. So they invited us, to the red carpet in New York City, and we got to meet the cast, and it was definitely very special in that respect. But it's a story of survival, right, and resiliency, and
congrats to you for winning a big award for that.
Oh, thank you. I won an Edward R. Murrow for that. I didn't win the Emmy, but I was nominated for an Emmy too, for that story. And it just meant a lot to me. It really did.
And by the way, as part of this 9/11 Stories podcast, I have that story from a different perspective of one of the NYPDers, Scott Stevens, who helped to save their lives that day. So that's a different perspective. People listening to this may want to check out the Scott Stevens podcast as well. It's just a remarkable story. I mean, it's wonderful to hear a story from 9/11 that ends well. There are so many that continue to this day that are not going well, with the number of people who are falling ill from the toxins and dying to this day, getting ill to this day. This much later, 20 years later, still people are getting cancers. Karla, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just, I hope we never forget, really. I just hope we never forget. It was, certainly a rough chapter, a terrible chapter in our history, but also one that we should learn from about being American and being patriotic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.